They say you can get used to anything, to the cold, to the silence, even to living alongside death. But what happened recently taught me that some things, no matter how deep you bury them, always find their way back. I've been a gravedigger for as long as I can remember. My name doesn't matter. No one remembers the name of the man who digs the graves, right? I've worked for 27 years at the cemetery in Willow Creek Ridge, a forgotten little town nestled between dusty hills. Among shattered headstones and rusted crosses, I learned to live with what most people avoid. I grew up in this place. My father was also a gravedigger, and when he passed away, I simply took his place, as if that was the only inheritance he ever left me. Life hasn't been kind, but I never complained. I made one promise to myself long ago. My daughter would have a different life. Her name is Emma, and to give her that future, I worked twice as hard, through sickness, freezing mornings, and sleepless nights, all to pay for her education, and it paid off. Just a month ago, she called me with her voice trembling with excitement. She had been accepted to a university in Arkansas to study medicine. It had been her dream since she was little. I sat on the edge of a freshly closed grave so I wouldn't faint. I cried, but as always, I did it in silence. Those of us who deal with the dead rarely show emotion. I remember that evening clearly. We were having dinner, rice, beans, and a slice of fried sausage. Emma couldn't stop talking. She was describing the labs, the books, the cadavers they'd be studying. I didn't understand much, but I watched her with pride, until she said something that knocked the breath out of me. "Dad, the professors asked us to bring real bones for a project." I stopped chewing and stared at her. That wasn't the kind of thing a father should be hearing from his daughter, but she kept explaining, said it was part of the curriculum, that human bones were incredibly expensive and hard to come by, and that some students were planning to search for them on their own, though it was complicated. Then, laughing softly, she said something that chilled me to my core. "If you happen to find a little bone lying around the cemetery, no one would notice, right?" She laughed, as if it were a joke. I didn't reply. I just lowered my head and kept eating. I couldn't sleep that night. Something deep inside warned me. If I crossed that line, nothing would ever be the same. At dawn, the air in Willow Creek was drier than usual. The cold bit like a dull blade, and the grey sky offered no warmth. I left the house under the excuse of starting early, but really, I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. Her comment haunted me, like some part of me already knew I was about to do something I'd regret. I wandered the cemetery paths with my head down, as if even the dead could judge me. I stopped in front of the bone vault. That place had always felt off. No one from town ever went near it, not even the elders. The small concrete structure was stained with moisture and neglect. Its iron door, rusted shut, looked like a mouth ready to swallow anyone who dared enter. My hands trembled as I pulled out the keys. The gate groaned, almost like it was protesting. Inside, the darkness was complete. The ceiling light had been broken for years, so I switched on my flashlight. The air was different in there. It didn't feel like the rest of the graveyard. It was heavy, thick, as if death itself lingered between those walls. The shelves were stacked with hand-numbered cardboard boxes. Some sagged from moisture. Each one held human remains that had been exhumed after years of neglect. Nameless bones, cracked skulls, fragments jumbled together like a shattered puzzle. Sometimes there was a note with a name. Most didn't even have that. I walked to the farthest corner, the one even new workers avoided. There I found a box more worn than the rest, shoved deep in the back. I opened it carefully. Inside, among vertebrae and broken ribs, was what I'd been searching for, an intact skull. Yellowed, clean, though missing a chunk on one side, as if it had been violently fractured. I lifted it under the beam of my flashlight. The teeth were still whole, and though I know it's impossible, I swear that skull smiled at me. A shiver crawled up my neck, like something unseen was watching from the shadows. I closed the box with care, but the guilt was already sinking into my chest like a stone. I hid it behind other boxes, as if that could erase what I'd just done. I finished my shift like any other day. When night fell, I waited for everyone to leave. I locked the cemetery gate and returned to the vault in silence. I took the box, wrapped it in a thin orange plastic bag, the kind that tears if you so much as look at it, and cradled it under my arm like a lunch container. I walked home in darkness, but that short walk, that night it felt endless, and I didn't realize then, but with every step something or someone was walking beside me. When I got home, Emma was on the couch scrolling on her phone. As soon as she saw me, she noticed something wasn't right in my face, but she said nothing, just waited. I placed the bag on the table and with clumsy hands pulled out the box. I opened it in front of her. For a moment there were no words, just her eyes glowing with awe and reverence, fixed on the skull, like she had been handed a treasure. "Dad, it's perfect," she whispered. She picked it up with both hands, like it was made of glass. She turned it in every direction, studying it as if she could absorb knowledge just by touching it. Then she walked to the backyard. Near the sink, we had an old wooden shelf stacked with tools, empty bottles and kitchen rags. She cleared a spot, placed the skull there and covered it with a dark cloth. I stood in the kitchen doorway, my stomach churning. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper, something more primal, something I couldn't name. I asked her not to keep it inside the house, told her it wasn't about superstition, it was about respect. She hugged me gently, like she used to when she was little, and told me I was the best dad in the world. Then she went to her room. The house fell into silence. After midnight, I still couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in bed, sweating cold, when I heard a sound, a low growl, rough and raspy, coming from the backyard. I got up barefoot and went to the window. There was Rusty, our old dog who hadn't moved much in months. But that night he stood tall, his back arched, eyes locked on the spot where the skull was. He wasn't barking like a regular dog. No. He let out a continuous growl as if he recognized something that didn't belong there. "Easy, Rusty," I whispered, but he didn't move. I tossed a little water from the kitchen, hoping he'd snap out of it. For a moment he stopped, looked at me with an expression that froze my blood, like he was asking for help. Then he turned back to the same spot, unmoving, alert. I went back to bed, but sleep never came. The mattress felt like ice, as though the cold was rising from within. My wife slept uncovered, unaware, but me, I was trembling. This cold, it wasn't from the weather. It felt alive, a cold that breathed. And when I closed my eyes, I could swear I heard a metallic sound, slow and grinding, like a gate opening, painfully slow. The same sound from the vault. At dawn, my eyes were burning, my head heavy. It was as if I hadn't rested at all, or as if something had been staring at me all night. I got up slowly, put coffee on the stove, and sat quietly at the kitchen table. Emma walked in minutes later, hair messy, dragging her feet, her face pale. She sat in front of me, took the mug I handed her, and before even taking a sip said, "Dad, did you call me last night?" I froze. I didn't know how to respond right away. She saw the look on my face and continued, "I heard someone knock on my door, really softly, like they didn't want to wake anyone. Then I heard my name, whispered. It sounded like your voice." A hollow sensation opened in my stomach. I hadn't gotten up at all that night. The thought that someone, or something, had imitated my voice made my skin crawl. Emma kept talking. She said she waited a few seconds before opening the door. When she did, the hallway was pitch dark. Rusty was lying on the floor, eyes wide, staring straight into the backyard. He didn't bark, he didn't move, he just stared, as if he could see someone she couldn't. She closed her door again, slowly, and didn't say anything to me. She thought maybe she had dreamt it, but deep down, she knew it wasn't a dream. I said nothing. I just stared out the window toward the backyard. The dark cloth was still there, draped over the skull, but the air around it felt different, like something had taken up space between us and didn't plan on leaving. I thought about the sound of the vault gate, the cold under the blankets, Rusty's growl. And now this. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been unearthed, not just a bone. It felt like a presence had awakened with it, something that didn't want to be moved, that didn't accept being disturbed. And the worst part was, we still didn't know what it wanted. Tap the yellow lamp icon and stick with us, so together we can uncover disturbing mysteries that defy explanation. What happened later that same week drew a clear line between before and after. That's when I realized this wasn't about superstition or old town folklore. It was real, and it was in my home. The following days were eerily quiet, and that silence didn't soothe me. It made me uneasy. Emma tried to go on like nothing had happened, pretending everything was normal, but I noticed she'd become more withdrawn. The skull was still outside, covered, like an unwanted guest no one talked about, but whose presence everyone could feel. And then it happened. It was Friday, just before nightfall. I was finishing up my shift at the cemetery. I had swept a few paths, fixed a broken cross, and was about to put the tools away in the back shed when a sharp, cracking sound made me turn around. Crack! It was like wood snapping in half, a harsh noise that echoed across the graveyard. At first, I thought some vandal had broken in. Sometimes the town drunks would hop the fence to steal bronze plaques or fake flowers to sell for a few bucks. But this sound, it didn't come from the gate or the wall. It came from the vault. My heart skipped. I froze for a moment, straining to listen, ears wide open, nothing else. But the silence, it pressed down like a sack of wet soil. I grabbed the flashlight from my belt and started walking slowly toward the small, forgotten building. The sun had nearly dipped behind the hill, and the sky had turned that strange yellow-gray that promises a long, cold night. When I reached the vault door, it was closed, just like always. I pushed it open, and the metallic screech hit my ears like a scream. Inside, the air was thicker than ever, colder. It felt like stepping into something alive. I switched on the flashlight. The shelves were still there, filled with the same worn-out boxes, some leaning, some stacked, but something looked off. There was a mess at the back. I walked toward it slowly. My hand holding the flashlight was trembling more with each step. And then I saw it. One of the boxes, the same one, was lying on the ground, wide open, blown apart like something had burst from within. Bones scattered everywhere, ribs, femur pieces, unrecognizable fragments, all flung out violently like they had been thrown in a fit of rage. I crouched down. I recognized the number marked inside the box. It was the same one I had hidden days ago, in the far corner where no one else ever goes. How had it ended up in the middle of the floor? Who moved it? Who opened it? The door is always locked. No one else has a key. No one enters there, except me. The silence inside the vault grew deafening. No crickets, no wind, nothing, and yet I could sense breathing. A stillness filled with presence, waiting. That night I knew, whatever it wasn't asleep anymore. I went home that night with my mind pounding, like I'd been buried alive under thoughts that wouldn't stop crashing down. I sat at the table, in front of the cold coffee from the day before, and placed the box gently on the wooden surface. My hands were still freezing, like the vault had soaked into my skin. Something inside me insisted I had to know who he was. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Maybe if I could figure out where the skull came from, I could find a way to bring it peace, or rid myself of it. So the next day I returned to the cemetery with one goal: to check the old records. In a forgotten back office, there was a metal bookshelf covered in dust and cobwebs. On one of the shelves sat the large black registry book, a thick hardbound volume holding names and dates for every burial since the 1980s. I flipped through page after page, my fingers stained with dirt and age. Most entries were handwritten, thin and hard to read, some nearly faded from moisture. My eyes burned, but I kept going. And then I found it. The number scribbled inside the box matched an entry almost completely erased. No name, just unknown, male, approx, 28 years old. Admitted winter 1998. Cause of death undetermined. Buried in common grave due to lack of family. Origin unknown. That was it. No one had left him flowers, no one had cried over him, no coffin, no ceremony, no words, just a rushed hole in the ground, and then forgotten. I stared at those lines for minutes. It hit me like a blow to the chest. The guilt was so strong, I had to lean on the table to keep from collapsing. I had pulled him from the only place he'd ever found silence. I had ripped him from anonymity to turn him into a study object. And that's when I understood. What I felt from that presence, it wasn't anger. It wasn't rage keeping me awake at night. It was sorrow, loneliness, the quiet ache of someone who wasn't even remembered in death. But at the same time, I knew understanding alone wouldn't be enough. I had crossed a line. I had awakened something. And now, it didn't just want to be acknowledged. It wanted to be seen. By then, the air in the house had changed. We didn't speak about it, but we all felt it. The atmosphere was heavier, the nights longer, even the hum of the fridge sounded louder. Everything seemed contaminated by an invisible presence, like the skull outside had infected every corner. That night, the silence shattered. I woke up suddenly, soaked in sweat. The room was completely dark. The fan was off, and I swear on everything I love, I hadn't unplugged it. I heard footsteps. Slow ones, like someone barefoot on the wooden hallway floor. The bed creaked as I sat up. My wife was still asleep. I checked the clock. It was 3:14 a.m. The exact time, they say, when things from the other side are closest. I got up without turning on the light. I walked toward the living room, guided by the pale glow coming from the backyard. And there, in the dim light, I saw it. A figure. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't a bad dream. It was tall, thin, hunched, standing right in front of the shelf where we had placed the skull. It wasn't doing anything, just standing there, still, watching, like it was waiting. My throat closed. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. The air thickened like I'd been wrapped in invisible plastic. And then, in a single motion, the figure turned its head toward me. But it had no face. Just a dark void, as if nothing existed inside it. I took a step back and tripped over a chair. The crash broke the silence. I flicked the lamp on, and it was gone. Nothing remained, just Rusty at the threshold of Emma's room, eyes gleaming in the dark. He didn't bark. He just stared at the same spot. I went to the backyard. The cloth covering the skull had been removed again. This time, it was neatly folded beside it. The skull itself hadn't moved, but it looked different. The teeth seemed clenched a little tighter. The jaw stiffened. I went back inside, shaking. I sat on the couch, head in hands. The cold I felt wasn't physical anymore. It came from within, clinging to the soul. A chill no blanket or coffee could chase away. And the worst part was, for the first time in years, I was afraid in my own home. Truly afraid. Not of a thief, not of death, but of what I had brought back with me from that cursed place. And now, clearly, it wasn't alone. I didn't wait for morning. Even with my body trembling and my throat as dry as cracked earth, I slipped on the same pants from the day before, grabbed the flashlight in one hand, and with the other, I took the skull. This time, I didn't cover it. I didn't wrap it. I held it the way one holds something delicate and sacred. I slipped out without making a sound. The sky was pitch black, starless, and the wind howled as if it carried words no one could understand. The street was empty, and even Rusty didn't bark when he saw me walk through the back gate, as if he knew this wasn't the time to interfere. I walked to the cemetery, feeling each step grow heavier than the last, not from exhaustion, from guilt. When I reached the vault, the lock screeched as if it too was judging me. The air inside was colder than before, like the place had been waiting. I pointed the flashlight toward the back, to the corner where everything had started. I knelt in front of the same worn-out box, its edges collapsed from years of dampness. I opened it slowly. The remains were there, scattered, showing signs of being disturbed with force. Putting them back wasn't quick work. It felt like trying to reassemble a broken body with pieces of forgotten history. With shaky hands, I placed the skull among the other bones. I did it with reverence, not out of fear, but because I finally understood that this wasn't just dried matter. It was someone who once walked, spoke, breathed, and who had been buried without a name, without a prayer, without a tear. I remained kneeling, head lowered, and I asked for forgiveness. Not out loud, not with grand words. I just said what I felt. I'm sorry. I didn't know. It wasn't out of malice. And as I said it, something shifted in the air, like the vault exhaled a long breath, like for a brief moment, the cold relented. Not completely, but enough to make me believe I'd done the right thing. I closed the box gently and pushed it to the back of the shelf, to the exact place where I had found it. I stayed one more minute, still listening, waiting for something that never came. And that was the strangest part. No noise, no whispers, no shadow, just a silence so deep it made me fear there was no turning back. I left without looking behind, shut the door, and walked home with a slightly lighter heart, but not at peace. I knew I had returned what wasn't mine, but I wasn't sure it was enough. When I got home that morning, the sun had just started peeking over the old rooftops of Willow Creek. The shadows stretched long, and the air still hung heavy, like the night hadn't fully ended. I slipped in through the back door, hoping no one saw me, but Emma was already awake. She was in the kitchen, a cup of warm tea in her hands. She looked at me with those sharp, observant eyes of hers, and she knew something had happened. She didn't say anything right away, just waited. I couldn't tell her the truth, not because I didn't trust her, but because I knew some things aren't meant to be shared. Some burdens can't be divided, so I lied. I told her Rusty had knocked over the box by accident, that he tried to chew on it, tore it apart, and the bones scattered all over the yard. I told her that when I saw the mess, I decided it was useless, and I had thrown it away. She frowned, didn't interrupt, but I could see she didn't quite believe me. Maybe not because the story was unbelievable, but because her intuition, like mine, had already sensed none of this was normal. "That's okay, Dad. It doesn't matter," was all she said. She hugged me without another word, as if she understood there was something that had to remain unsaid. And in that embrace, I felt that, even though she didn't know the whole truth, she still carried the weight of it. The days that followed moved strangely. Emma packed her things to return to college. Her vacation had ended, and with it, something in the house had shifted. The afternoon she left, she told me one of her classmates had gotten a skull from a legal source, with all the paperwork, that she didn't need another anymore. She said it with a calm smile, but her eyes told a different story. There was relief in them, like she too wanted to close that chapter without naming it. I nodded and said nothing else. That night, alone, I sat on the living room couch and looked out at the empty shelf in the yard, where just days before sat the object that had disrupted everything. There was no trace left of it, no cloth, no lingering silence, but inside me, it was still there. Some experiences never leave you. You bury them, yes, like everything in this line of work, but you know they're there, just under the surface, waiting for you to stir what was never meant to be touched again. After Emma left, the house settled back into its usual rhythm. The walls stopped creaking in the middle of the night. Rusty no longer growled at the backyard. The air felt lighter, like peace had returned, but I wasn't the same. I went back to the cemetery each day, as always. Cleaning, maintenance, funerals with no ceremony. The ones that arrived with no family, no prayers, the forgotten ones. But since then, every time I pass in front of the vault, something inside me tightens. Not from fear, from respect. I no longer enter lightly. I no longer close the door without looking twice. I move slower now, quieter, as if that concrete structure had earned something that not even the years, or the city's orders, or my routine could ever take from it. Dignity. I've seen a lot in this job. Abandoned corpses, broken souls, names that vanish without a trace. But I never imagined that a single skull, taken with the intention of helping my daughter, would awaken something so deep. Not a ghost, a truth. I learned that being forgotten hurts more than death, that some people die twice. First, when they stop breathing, and again, when no one remembers them. And maybe that's what brought him back. He didn't want revenge. He didn't want to scare us. He just wanted to be noticed, to be acknowledged, for someone to say, you were here, you existed, even if it was too late. And that's why now, every time I handle old remains, I do it with a different kind of care. With a word on my lips I never used before, sorry. Because I know they're not just bones. They're interrupted stories, lives that for some reason were left unfinished. And as long as this cemetery stands and I remain alive, I'll do everything I can to never make that mistake again. To not treat the sacred like just another tool. To not bring home what belongs to another realm. Because even though the box was returned, even though the bones rest in their place, that silence remains. And every time I pass the vault at the end of the day, I lower my head, not out of habit, not out of guilt, but because I know that there, in that cold and damp corner, someone is still listening, someone who, at last, was seen, and now simply stays silent.